doing this.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Let me give you a subject. A peanut is neither a nut nor a pea.
Discuss.
Just discuss. Discuss amongst yourselves.
Yeah, that is true. But I don't know why it just seems like a nut. It does. But it's technically not a nut.
Not a
You know,
nut.
sometimes,
What'd you say here?
sometimes I feel like a nut, sometimes I don't.
There you go.
Oh, boy, that's pretty. Wow.
Well, I'd say our preschool's a nut-free facility, but our rabbi certainly isn't. So
No, that's that. I can attest to that. And I just want to say he does services extremely well. I come to his services almost every Friday night. He just does a great job. And you know what? You really feel like you're there. The fact that you read off the names from Facebook for the people who said Shabbat Shalom, it really makes a difference. You really feel like you're there. I mean, it's really one of the better, it's so easy to do and so minor, but yet it completely changes the feeling of it. I mean, you really feel like you're there. You really feel like you're there in services and you're being included. It's excellent. And like I said, I'm very thankful for your services. And as I told you the other day, Thanksgiving weekend, I was exceptionally thankful for Cantor Manny because he wasn't there and I had to hear you sing.
And then the next week he was going, thank God the Cantor's back.
Yeah. But the two, you guys need to do this forever.
Yeah.
You can never retire.
Well, when things get back to something resembling normal, I think we're gonna keep that format. Maybe not every Friday night.
No, but it's it's value added. It's something else in the repertoire, and I mean, the two of you sitting there at the table together, it feels like we're at your Shabbat home and we're there with you. When you read people's names who are participating with you, you feel like you're right there. And I think hybrid models are going to be a benefit too. I mean, we don't want to replace in person, but I think there are going to be more people who will participate this way too.
Well,
I think so.
I think it's a mitzvah that they're creating this environment where people can feel incorporated when so many of us are stuck at homes.
Yes.
And on the theme of mitzvot, I'd like to welcome everybody to Nosh Schmooze today, and we're going to be talking about the mitzvah of life-saving donations and organ donations. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our guests today. Most of you know Rabbi Alan Tufts. He is the rabbi at Temple Bethel of Hollywood. But today we're also here with Rabbi Jeffrey Kurtz-Lendner, an organ transplant recipient, and Eric Steger, his organ donor. And as always, if you have questions or comments for my guests, please leave them in the comment section on Facebook and I will field your questions to them. But first, a bit about my guests. So Rabbi Jeffrey Kurtz-Lendner is currently serving as a volunteer rabbinic educator during the pandemic. He has also served as the Director of Jewish Learning, Engagement, and Outreach at the David Posnack Jewish Center in Davie, the Rabbi of Temple Solel in Hollywood, Florida, and the Rabbi of the North Shore Jewish Congregation in New Orleans suburb, Mandeville, Louisiana. While in Mandeville, he oversaw the congregation's recovery efforts during Hurricane Katrina. In 2015 and 16, he served as a volunteer police chaplain for the police departments of Davie and Hollywood. He is a member of the Central Conference of American Rabbis and served as the treasurer for the Southeast region. And in the past, he served as the president of the Broward County Board of Rabbis, as well as on the board of the Jewish Federation of Broward County. He was a member of the steering committee of the Jewish Outreach Institute's Big Tent Judaism Initiative and is on the rabbinic cabinet of United Jewish Communities. And he served on the ethics committee of Lakeview Regional Medical Center in Covington, Louisiana, and on the institutional review board of Tulane University. He was recognized in the 40 Under 40 issue of the New Orleans Gambit Weekly. And Eric Steger, welcome.
Let me just say, it's Steger, my friend. His name is Steger. Yes.
I apologize, Eric
No,
Steger.
Okay.
Sorry, Eric. Is 51 years old, lives in Sunnyvale, California, and works as a math tutor for Foothill College. His first donation experience, whole blood at a high school blood drive, was a failure. He couldn't get a pint out of either arm. 20 years later, in 2007, the Gift of Life Bone Marrow Foundation matched him with a leukemia patient for a peripheral stem cell transplant to regenerate that person's bone marrow. That was a very gratifying success. Following up on that, he attended a blood drive successfully and was recruited as a platelet donor by the Stanford Blood Center. His lifetime donation total for platelets, whole blood, plasma, and red blood cells is currently somewhere above 150. He wrote, "As I write these lines, I'm at CBS donating platelets, and I have a needle in my left arm." In 2010, he underwent testing to donate a kidney, but was not accepted as a living donor. In 2018, Eric became aware of altruistic liver donation and got involved again. After testing for 3 other patients who ultimately received help from other sources, he was paired with Rabbi Jeffrey Kurtz-Lendner, and the transplant was performed at UPMC on January 7th, 2020. So not too long ago. According to Eric, that mitzvah was fully equal to the other one in 2007, and perhaps to the collection of other donations through the years, but it was much more challenging physically. It was a major surgery that took several weeks of recovery time. Meanwhile, he's busy living a busy life with work, synagogue attendance, competitive chess, and outdoor activities. In the not too distant future, it might even be possible to revisit the idea of donating a kidney, since the barriers to donating have been lowered somewhat. We'll see what happens. So welcome everybody. I'm so glad to have you all here. This is incredible. I can tell you that in my life, I've worked a lot with organ and tissue donation education and educating Jewish communities, but I've never had the pleasure of interviewing an organ donor and a transplant recipient at the same time. So this is really such a beautiful moment. I'm so glad to have you here. And Rabbi Kurtz-Lendner, I'm curious what your life would look like now if you had not received that donation of the liver.
You might have to come visit me at Menorah Gardens. If I hadn't had that, when after they did the surgery, they test all these levels of your blood to see how you're doing. And the levels indicated that I was relatively stable, not great, but stable. So I wasn't eligible to be put on a wait list for a donor from a deceased person because my numbers weren't bad enough. However, after the surgery, they told me there are a very tiny number of people, and I got to fit into one of those categories that the numbers indicate that you're stable, but you're not. And my numbers probably would never have gotten to the point where I would have been put on a wait list for a transplant, but my liver would have gone out and I wouldn't have survived. So I probably only had a few months left at the time of at most a few months left at the time of my transplant. And if it hadn't been for Eric, the reason I was able to get a transplant, even though my numbers did not appear, they didn't hit that level that may be eligible to be on a wait list, is because Eric, as a altruistic living donor, said that I am going to donate part of my liver and I'm designating it for him. So he designated his liver specifically for me, and therefore I was able to get it. And therefore Eric literally, I mean, in every sense of the way, he saved my life, because nothing else would have come along. By the time I would have died before my numbers got to allow me to be put on a registry for a wait list. The fact is also, I want to share that 25% of people who actually make it onto the wait list don't survive until they get a liver. So even if my numbers have gotten bad enough to become on a wait list, there was only a, there was there was a 1/4 chance that I never would have gotten a liver anyway. And given the pandemic, those odds would have been even worse because after the pandemic, liver cultivation of deceased persons was put on hold because of the effects of coronavirus, and it took a while before they could test whether someone had been infected with coronavirus after they passed. And so I definitely wouldn't. I mean, I am certain if it hadn't been for Eric, I wouldn't be here. So, I think it's really important for people to know about the possibility of living donors, because even in the best of circumstances, a person has a 75% chance of survival of when they're put on the wait list of receiving a liver. But living donors changes that dynamic, because an altruistic living donor changes those odds, because you just can't. Some people just can't wait until they're able to get a donor from a deceased person, and if you meet the qualifications, being a living donor is clearly an option for someone who meets certain physical standards and who is healthy enough to do it. So I would certainly encourage people who are willing to consider it. It is a risky surgery, so it's obviously not one that you want to do cavalierly. You have to take into consideration. I wouldn't, for example, encourage a single parent of children to engage in this, because that to me there's enough of a risk that you don't want to. The risk is very low. First of all, let me just start saying the risk to the donor is extraordinarily low. If I were a single parent with young children, I wouldn't want to take that risk. But for most people, I mean, look, Eric, have you ever, you do some mountain climbing, right? Isn't that what you do? Hiking? And are you hiking again?
Oh, I've been hiking for months.
Okay, so a year ago, he gave a part of his liver, and he's already hiking for months, and he's doing well, and he's healthy, and his liver returns to about 90% of the size, but 100% of the function. So his liver is functioning just as well as it did before he donated part of his liver, and now my liver is functioning just as well as it was functioning in his body. Now it's functioning in my body, the portion that he donated to me. So really, I have to say, there is a hero among us, and Eric truly is. He is my hero, and for the fact that he's not only my hero, he's donated, done so many other donations to save people's lives, and this has to be one of the highest forms of mitzvah, that he actually has given part of himself to save the lives of others. So I am delighted to be able to meet him. Now, most of the time with altruistic donors, the donor and the recipient can't meet because there are rules and regulations. So if Eric had discussed with the hospital that he wants to be a living donor, and even if he and I agreed to meet each other, they would not be allowed to put us together. Fortunately for us, though, we were brought together through a third party, an independent person, and she followed the rules of asking each of us. She did not just introduce us, she asked both of us if we would be willing to self-identify to each other and meet each other, and we both eagerly said yes. So we actually met in the hospital, and it's funny because the hospital had all these rules against, disclosing information, but once we were willing to meet each other, their PR team came in and filmed us and videoed us. So it's like, we can't get you to meet, but if you meet on your own, we want to video it. Nice. So that was great, because that really also, the story was not only broadcast within the hospital for its own PR purposes, it was picked up by the local news and then even made it to CBS National News as a story, which I am grateful for, because it shares, the importance of being a living donor. And my story and Eric's story, I hope, will inspire other people to realize that for the overwhelming majority of people who are accepted as candidates as a living donor, the health ramifications are very, very minimal. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. And the benefits are immense. So if more people will take advantage of that, then more people with liver issues will have that chance to survive.
And Eric, I'm curious how, what first motivated you to want to become a donor, and how did you get roped into this scenario?
Well, I can't say I got roped in. I mean, in order.
How did you become connected with this third party that you were able to become an altruistic living donor?
Well, I think it all started with the previous donation. That was, as I wrote, and you said to everyone watching, that it was a very gratifying experience. I was following a link from if I remember correctly, it was from the Gift of Life website itself, a link that I don't think is active anymore, but it brought me to other types of donation, right? So I wanted to follow it up maybe with something else. And so there was a list of things that a person could, donate from his or her, body as a living donor. And altruistically at that time, the kidney was the only one. And so I did some more research, and that research brought me to the Halachic Organ Donation Society. And at that time, they maintained a list of people who needed organs. Now their mission is solely educating people on the halacha of organ donation after death. So anyway, I got in touch with them, and they put me in touch with someone on their waiting list who was in Israel. And we did a lot of corresponding, and I did some testing locally. Ultimately, it didn't work out. Because of the high antibodies on her end. But anyway, it took months to figure this out. And I was so geared up to go to Israel. I had, gotten the passport and everything. I had never been to Israel before. I had never been outside the United States, and I'd been to Canada and Mexico, but I had never been anywhere where I needed a passport before. And so, having never been to Israel, after hearing this news that we were not a compatible, donor recipient pair, I just said, "What the heck? I'm going to Israel anyway." And I packed my bags and I went to Israel, and I didn't know anybody there. and I just showed up with a list of names and telephone numbers of people to call, their people's relatives and friends. I didn't know anybody. Anyway, one of these people that I met over there, a former classmate of my rabbi back in Sunnyvale, he put me up for several days, and he said, "Have you contacted a certain Chaya Lipschutz in Brooklyn, New York? She pairs donors with recipients." And I said, "No, I've never heard of her." Right. So when I came back, I got in touch with her, and then we started this, process all over again. Right. So every time you get involved in one of these, potential transplants, it's going to take months and months and months and months and months of talking. Mm-hmm. There is a great deal of talking and testing and more talking. And so Chaya, she asked if I was willing to go back to Israel for someone else. I said, sure. And so then we got that, machinery rolling again. And when I got over there, then they took a very hard look at me, and they said, thanks, but no thanks.
Wow.
That whole story is, it's a long one, but they ran their tests and they excluded me from donating to anybody.
Okay.
And so so I came back and got on with my
Mhm.
and meanwhile I had seen my doctor and everything was going to be okay. So years passed and I was working for still working for Foothill College, and I'm just watching television one day, and on comes this commercial. This is in the fall of 2018. So meanwhile, for all the intervening years, I was going to the Stanford Blood Center and getting my fix, donating platelets and plasma, and so meanwhile, or before I had gone to Israel, I had participated in a blood drive. The Stanford Blood Center had recruited me for platelet donations. I was doing that on a fairly regular basis, so that was ongoing. And then in the fall of 2018, I saw this television commercial for the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. They were seeking donors to come to their hospital and donate part of their liver. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. I had never, heard of altruistic liver donation before. Altruistic kidney donation had been around for a long, long time. And I kind of sat on it for a while. I said, well, do I really want to put myself through this again? The experience in Israel had been sort of a disappointment and even a humiliation after the excitement. I should tell you that they had a big party for me at the synagogue, a big kiddush, right?
Aww.
So there was a huge kiddush in the shul, and there was a cake and there were speeches and to send me off. It was a big send off, and then when I came back, it was a big letdown. It was I came back to the sound of crickets, and I was wondering, do I really want to go through that a second time? And I kind of sat on the decision for a few weeks. I went back and forth, with it. And that commercial kept playing and playing and over and over and over again. Excuse me. And finally, after a lot of back and forth, and I said, all right, I'm going to, get back into it. But I'm not going to tell anybody about it except for a few people like my rabbi and my family, right? But there's not going to be a big kiddush to send me anywhere. There's no big kiddush, and I'm not going to tell a whole lot of people, a few close friends, and that's it, right? The community doesn't have to know. If it doesn't work out, then it'll just die, right? I mean, we'll just keep it quiet, right? So then we started this machinery going one last time. But it wasn't that straightforward. It was actually extremely complicated, more complicated than I was expecting, and I was expecting complicated.
So I'm curious, how much of your liver, like what percentage of your liver did you donate, that now it's going to be back to 90% of what you originally had?
I donated approximately 60%.
60, 60.
60, yes.
I've heard that the liver is the only human organ that regenerates itself. Is that right? Does it regenerate itself?
It grows larger. It's in two big lobes, and you don't get the lobe, growing back. It's not like the lizard's tail, growing back. The liver that remains, that lobe just grows bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I
and
see.
it's going to top out, between 80-90%.
So
I'm not sure.
Could you do a subsequent donation?
No, liver.
Once. And how long was your recovery period?
Well, that's in stages.
What were you admitted to the hospital? Or was it like an outpatient sort of thing?
So I was admitted to the hospital. I had to stay there I was there for 6 days.
Hmm.
Yes.
So it's a significant surgery.
Right.
Yeah, it's significant to say the least. Yeah, so um, so the liver is one of the few organs that will, behave like that. I think the lung also, because there is a lung donation as well. It's not so common, but it's been done, and I believe they take a lobe. I think the lungs, one has 3 lobes and the other 2, and so they'll take one out of one lobe out of a donor, and I believe the rest of the lung will sort of expand to fill the empty space, like the liver does.
Hmm.
I believe that to be the case.
So, I'm curious, rabbis, when I was growing up, there weren't people that weren't rabbis that I met that knew that organ donation was a thing you could do. Like there were so many myths around it that you couldn't be buried in a Jewish cemetery and all these different things. And now there's the Halachic organ donor society. There's Renewal, which it's a kidney donation organization. That's a Jewish organization. I'm curious if you could speak to Pikuach Nefesh and where that lie. What is Pikuach Nefesh, first of all, and where it lies on like the order of mitzvot?
It's very high. I studied Jewish medical ethics in the early 1970s. And maybe you remember, Jeff, I think the big guy in those days was David Feldman. Remember? I don't know if he's around anymore.
In the mid 70s, you said?
In mid 70s, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not nearly as old as you.
That's true.
That's
It's true.
That is way before my time.
There were, it was very controversial in the traditional communities, especially, in the traditional definitions of death as they've come down halachically. There was no brain dead in ancient Israel. If your respiration ceased, if your heartbeat ceased, you were dead. So taking a heart, cutting out a heart of someone who was still breathing, that the brainstem was still working, was very controversial. There was a question that the Orthodox community had to answer: are you committing murder? The person was never going to recover and have a normal life, but were you murdering the person? That was something that they had to come to grips with, and in subsequent years they did. They changed the definition of death. They expanded it. There was that whole thing of if you had in a more you mentioned about being buried in a Jewish cemetery. There was a notion of actual, we call it tchiyat metim, an actual physical resurrection of the dead when the Messiah would come. So if you had an amputation, you were supposed to be, that limb or whatever it was supposed to be buried with you so that you wouldn't be a one-legged person when you were resuscitated. So there were a lot of questions that had to be asked, or at least asked and answered before you could proceed lefi halacha.
Yeah, and so I studied it when I was in rabbinical school, which was I actually studied it later. I studied it in the 90s, and by that point, Orthodox authorities were permitting organ donations because after analysis and research, they came to the conclusion that, at first, when you have a new idea, it has to be understood and debated. But once they felt they understood it, there are only 3 sins in Judaism only 3 mitzvot that cannot be violated in order to save a life. And preserving a body in its entirety for death is not one of them. So the preservation of life takes precedence of all but the 3 cardinal sins, which are considered as its murder, idolatry, and adultery are the only three things that cannot be violated. So with that in mind, not only would it be permissible, it would be a mitzvah to donate an organ if it can save someone's life. And they've gone as far to say that there is a source, I forget where the source is, but there's a source that says restoring someone's eyesight is as if they're restoring their life. So they've also permitted the donation of the eyes to restore someone's eyesight, even though you're not restoring their life, it's still in the same category. So it is clearly,
as someone who is blind is constant danger, I think is what the source material says.
I don't even remember. I remember reading, I actually read the tshuva. There was that tshuva that I found, and it was in Hebrew, written by an Orthodox rabbi, and it permitted, again, this was almost 30 years ago when I read it, so I barely remember it, but I know by that time, by the 90s, it was fully acceptable within Orthodox circles to save someone's life. In fact, as we know, Eric, his congregation, it's Chabad, and I know that at one point when the possibility of of living donation came up, I was opposed to the idea. In fact, my sister wanted me to be an organ donor, and I told her she wanted to donate part of her liver to save my life at one point, and I told her, no, I'm not doing that. She's not Orthodox, but there is a Chabad rabbi in her community who heard of the story and asked to meet with her and told her that she must convince me to accept a donation from her liver. She never told me this until after I had my surgery, but she told me that this Chabad rabbi told her that she must convince me to accept part of her liver because it's a mitzvah for her to save my life, and it's a mitzvah for me to take the steps to save my life. In the meantime, Eric had come forward. Eric and I were connected. So this woman that he was referring to, I want to tell you this story. It was almost by accident that he and I met. So Chaya had sent out a message to members of her community saying, if you know of people who need kidney, I'm a coordinator for lining up kidney recipients. So that message went throughout the Orthodox community. The Orthodox community in Teaneck shared it with the entire rabbinical council, there's this Jewish community list in Teaneck, New Jersey, and anyone can sign up for that community email list. So my sister, who is not Orthodox, received this message that came from the community list, and she forwarded the email to me, and she said, is this something you might be interested in? And it took me about I think it took me as long as 3.5 seconds. I think it took me that long to email her back yes. And within about 10 minutes, I had emailed Chaya, and within about 15 minutes, Chaya had called me back on my phone. Now, Chaya is a talker. She is great. I love her. She's
the ultimate matchmaker.
Yeah, she is. Exactly.
Yes,
And she goes, you know, that's not what we do. We do kidney donations, but I'm pretty sure I have someone who is looking for a recipient. And
Wow.
then, so it was within a day or so, she said, we've got this lined up, but it actually took several months for the whole process to happen. And one of the problems with liver disease is that your body isn't cleaning out the toxins properly, so your brain starts to function improperly. So I was experiencing, it's called, now my brain's not functioning, I can't remember, encephalopathy. So encephalopathy is when the toxins build up in your brain and you start getting foggy and confused. And so there was a lot going on around me that I wasn't fully aware of. And one of the things that happened, apparently about a week before the surgery, we were still living, we hadn't yet moved to Pittsburgh. We were packing up the stuff, and apparently there was some paperwork problem with the blood work. And without me knowing it, my wife was worried that this whole thing might not come together because there was a problem, Eric being in California and the place being in Pittsburgh, and it was a complication of getting the right paperwork from California to Pittsburgh. And Anyway, I don't even know the details of it, but
The details that I can fill in were this happened during the last week of December, and so those other holidays interfered with the process.
mm,
Right. So
and so
um,
yeah.
it made my blood tests a real headache nightmare. Let me tell you, it was a real nightmare. And
So
Paya and I were afraid that it wasn't going to be able to be worked out in time.
well, I can tell you that the person at the hospital, Robin told me that there's a coordinator at the hospital. There's one coordinator who works with the donors and one coordinator who works with the recipients. And our recipient coordinator told us, she goes, I know this seems like a nightmare and bureaucratically it's difficult, but she goes, in all of my years here, I've never seen something like this interfere. The paperwork never interfered. They will get it. So she reassured my wife, and I didn't even hear about this until months later. So, we were just packing up and getting ready to move, and then we moved. And even after we moved, it hadn't been fully resolved yet. And so we had moved, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting surgery next week. And in Robin's mind, at the back of her head, it's like, she wasn't even 100% certain that would happen, but it all came together, and we got to meet, and that was really joyous for me to meet Eric. And you know what was one of the best things is my kids. Now my kids are adults now. At the time they were I think 20 and 24, and so after the surgery, the kids came in with these huge smiles, and I should have known, but again, with my encephalopathy, the whole thing, they were far more worried about the whole thing than they were letting on. So they had these huge smiles on their faces. And I demanded of my kids that they come in and meet Eric, because I wanted him to see that. To me, the greatest joy of the whole thing was not waking up and realizing I had a new lease on life. I mean, that was of course, that was fantastic. But the best part for me was seeing my kids' reaction to it, because more than worrying about myself, I was worrying about my family. And if I didn't make it, the trauma that would be, for how traumatic that would be for them. And so when I saw the smiles on their faces, I'm like, this is why we did all this.
How long did it take for you to feel the improvement in your life?
Well, my first month of recovery was kind of difficult, actually. I had a couple of complications. I also didn't react well to the anti-rejection medications, the first ones. Is someone knocking?
That may have been me moving my chair.
Okay, that's okay. I had a bad reaction to the initial anti-rejection meds. They ended up putting me on something else. So for the first month, it was quite challenging. I ended up having to go back I was home for like 5 days after they released me, and then they had to bring me back to the hospital. But then once that, so I was in the hospital a month, I came home, and it took me a couple of months before I could start feeling, better. I would say I really started feeling like I was getting back to normal starting in probably about September.
And the surgery
was in January.
Okay,
yeah. So really, but I mean, I would say by about March or so is when they said you're well enough to start going out and exploring. And then
but
the
just
pandemic
kidding,
hit.
because there's a pandemic.
The pandemic hit, and so the doctor goes, never mind, you're on your anti-rejection meds suppress your immune system, so don't go out anywhere. So I mean, people ask me, how do I like Pittsburgh? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I moved here right before my surgery. I had my surgery, then the pandemic hit. I can tell you, what I can tell you about Pittsburgh is the hospital and my house, and that's about all I know.
There's a lovely river. I hope.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, we actually, before the pandemic hit, we actually did go to a park a few times where I was able to hobble out of the car and walk over and look at. I've seen a few things, but really by March I was starting to feel better. But even so, and as I was getting better, March and April, I think it was about March when I stopped using a cane to walk around. I felt stable enough to walk around without a cane. I still had aches and pains, and I ended up having a follow-up surgery for I don't know, something happened in my internal thing where there was like a blockage or something. I don't know what it was, but I had some one night in very end of July. I woke up with I couldn't go to sleep. I had terrible pains. I called the doctor. They said you should go to the emergency room, and they ended up having to do another surgery on me. But I was there for a week, and after liver surgery, where I was there for a month, this was like nothing. I mean, like, okay, just do it, just fix whatever you have to fix, and then I'll go home. And so then after that is when I really started feeling better, and I would say by around the end of August, beginning of September, I really pretty much felt almost virtually back to normal by then.
You mentioned, Rabbi, your kids and how this has had, an impact beyond you on your life, all the lives that life affects. I'm thinking about the founder of Gift of Life, Jay Feinberg, who his family set up, a bank basically to get people in their registry to see who could be a donor for him. And he set up Gift of Life initially as a Jewish organization so that more people could be matched with life-saving donors. Yeah. And that, Eric, if you had not seen that link on their site, this donation potentially wouldn't happen. All the lives that have been impacted by people making those steps. Yeah. For some pain, you went through a significant surgery, but all of the lives that this has impacted so far, it's really such an incredible mitzvah that goes beyond the bounds of just that like one life that you were directly impacting.
Yeah. Eric, your perseverance has to be commended incredibly because, like I said, it's not just my life, but my kids and, my kids' whole attitude, everything. Their whole demeanors have changed. I'm seeing my kids are now being, my older daughter graduated from college right when I was getting sick. So she moved in with us to help take care of me. My younger daughter moved in with us because of the pandemic. We said we wanted us to all. Nobody leaves the house ever because they're afraid of picking it up and bringing it home to me. And, if I get this virus, I mean, my ability to fight it off would be pretty low.
Will you be able to take the vaccination?
They're recommending that I do, but because I don't have an urgent need to go out right now, I'm going to say let the people who have to get out, they're transplant recipients who have to get out and work and go, and let them get it. First of all, give them first access to it because I don't need it as quickly, and second of all, they don't have data yet. So if I can wait to see what the data shows, just to make sure, but my doctor feels confident. He's recommending that his transplant patients take the vaccine. There just is no data yet on this vaccine in transplant patients.
Will you have to be on the antibody?
The anti-rejection medication?
Anti-rejection medicines for the rest of your life?
Yes.
Okay.
They do keep reducing them. In fact, I'm on two, out of all the medications I was on an antiviral, antibacterial, anti-this, anti-that. I'm down to only two medications, and one of them they just cut in half, and they may cut it in half again. But I'm still going to be on these two for the rest of my life. It's just.
Are there any side effects?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, the side effects, like they weaken my muscle. First of all, the major side effect is that I'm less resistant. I have less resistance to bacteria. So like one of the things that probably two hardest things about the transplant are, one, I can never eat lox again. Oh. And for a Jewish person, that's really tough. They said you can't eat it because even though it's smoked, it's not fully cooked. And, I wouldn't be able to tolerate if there's a bacteria in there. So I can't go to a salad bar anymore. Anytime I eat fresh vegetables, I have to wash them myself and have to really scrub them. So that, and there's some general muscle weakenings here and there. I've got some, I have some bloating, some swelling in my abdominal area. And it's because he told me it's the medications I'm on weaken the muscles a little bit. So there's really nothing I can do about it. But, but I'm here and I'm alive, and with the proper precautions, and never having lox again. And I can also never have grapefruit again because the grapefruit interferes with the anti-rejection med. So, just a couple of, but when you look at it, the fact that I'm here at all, I mean, so if I can never have lox again, I'll have to live with that. That's just, I mean, the alternative is to never having anything again, So.
Well, I want to let you know that while you've been talking, I've been adding some helpful links for our viewers, so that if they're interested in finding out more information about altruistic living donation, I shared the link for Gift of Life, and also for Renewal, and UPMC.
And there's also the site that Chaya runs. It's called kidneymitzvah.com.
Got it. I will add that as well. Kidneymitzvah.com. I'm curious if there's like one takeaway from your experience, both Eric as a donor and Rabbi Kurtz-Lendner as a transplant recipient, if there's one takeaway that you can relate to our viewers, what is that you're taking with you from this experience?
Who gets to go first?
Why don't you're going? Go ahead, Eric.
Okay. Well, the whole process from when I saw a TV commercial to the time when they put me in the operating room, everything that happened along the way was an absolute miracle. I mean, there are so many ways that this could have gone wrong. I mean, it could have not happened. I gave them every chance in the world to reject me for one reason or another, right? And at every step, from the first phone call I made, I said, well, they'll probably just say thanks, but no thanks. I'll tell them that I'm taking this medication and that medication. They weren't phased, right? All the flying around and testing that went on the three other potential recipients, they all got help from some other source, right? So the steps that brought me to Rabbi Jeff, it was an amazing sequence of events. It's too long a story to go into here, but all the things that could have gone wrong, but they went right. Any break in that process, and we wouldn't be talking about it today, right? It was just an amazing thing, really it was.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say that and from my end, if my sister had just missed that email that day, or if I had looked at it and seen the word kidney and said, you know what, this isn't what I need, and any, or if I could have missed that email, or if a spam filter had intercepted that. Look, there's so many things that could have gone wrong, and all the things that went right. And my cousin, I think your congregation maybe told you, I have a cousin who made a contribution to Chabad in your name. I hope they told you from the.
Yes, they did.
They did. Good.
Appreciated that
Good.
very much.
Yeah, good. Because my cousin feels so passionate about this and what you did, and really, the community that he comes from, that your Chabad community is so incredibly supportive of this, and it's just. That really all the things went, and I keep in touch with Eric, and Eric, how grateful I am.
Of course.
It's interesting because I just have a great deal of gratitude. You gave new meaning to the morning blessing, where we say in the morning, we thank God for having restored our soul. Shehechazarta bi nishmati. You've restored my soul in me. And so that gratitude is very real. But the other thing that my message for people, the one message that I have is that, when you have a health problem early on, I want people to think about, take it extremely seriously. When I was first diagnosed with fatty liver disease, I was told, what should you do? And they said, you should probably try to lose some weight, but we're just going to keep an eye on it. So that's what the first message was. So I was like, okay, so I have fatty liver disease. I didn't even know what it meant. I just knew that they were monitoring every so often. They had to check the fat around my liver. And then eventually they said, okay, well, now it's developed into the next stage. And so you really probably should try to lose some weight, although often it will never progress past the stage that you have it. And so I know the doctors were trying to be reassuring, and I certainly appreciate that. But at the same time, if I had understand, because for a lot of people, it doesn't progress. But if I had realized the severity of something that seemed as innocuous as fatty liver disease early on, I could have taken steps I might have been able to take steps to prevent the progression of fatty liver disease to full-on cirrhosis. And I know people who actually have done that. They've had fatty liver disease and reversed it. Now, it's also possible that there's nothing I could have done. There's so many factors that go into it that maybe there's nothing that I could have done to reverse it, but I could have been taking more active steps, and I wish I had, because then I wouldn't have had to go through all that. So one message I have to people is that, especially when you're young and healthy and just starting to get the first signs of any kind of condition, whether it be your cholesterol starts going higher, or you told you have, some fat around your liver, or you're pre-diabetic or anything like that. If people will take that seriously and start making changes more quickly, some of the things could be prevented. The first thing that people don't even realize how serious fatty liver disease, people hear cirrhosis and they think alcohol. But yet this is called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Alcohol had absolutely nothing to do with this. When I would drink a lot, I would drink about 6 beers a year. Once every couple of months, I would drink a beer. And now I'm down to none. I'm done with alcohol for the rest of my life. But so alcohol has nothing to do with my condition. But if I put some more effort into trying to exercise more and have a healthier diet, then I might have been able to avoid getting to this stage. But in the end, I'm now thrilled with where things are, and hopefully maybe the lessons from Eric's life and my life, hopefully can empower other people. Even as something, it's just giving blood. That is nothing compared to what Eric has gone through. I used to give blood every 2 months until they told me I couldn't anymore. I started having an iron deficiency, and they said, "We can't take your blood anymore." But I used to do that every 2 months, and not just because I got a free movie ticket. Yeah, it's just really, we had a neighbor in our community whose young daughter developed leukemia and needed people to donate blood either directly to her, or if you weren't a match, you could donate in her quote account so that she would get credit for the blood you donate, and then she would be able to get blood without cost based on your donation. So that's when I started giving blood, and from that point on, I gave every 2 months. End of story. Every 2 months I went until they told me I can't give blood anymore. So that's actually a relatively simple way, and will definitely save someone's life. So, and then, there are lots of things in between that and what Eric has done up to what Eric has done. And so Eric, and you can go hiking, and I'm sure Eric would be happy to go hiking with you after you donate.
Of course.
And I would say, just as a side note, that folks sometimes they decide to eliminate themselves. They think like, oh, well, if for whatever reason they can't donate blood, then they probably can't be an organ donor, and that the same rules don't always apply. Right. And so let professionals rule you out. Don't rule yourself out.
And you don't always have to be 100% match. They told me I was thinking they had to do all these tests to make sure he and I were a perfect match. And the only thing that had to match up were our blood types. Other than that, everything else is managed through the anti-rejection meds.
It's incredible.
In the case of the liver, you have to be a fairly good size match.
Right, right, size, yes.
And we are about the same size. So
you're in better shape than I am. That's why I needed the liver and you didn't. You can also donate smaller portions of your liver to children. There are
Yes.
children with liver disease. So even if you can't find the exact match size-wise, smaller portions can sometimes be taken out of a healthy adult liver and given to a child.
That's incredible. It's so incredible. All the medical marvels that allowed for this to happen, all the little intricate pieces that went right for this to happen, but also all the people that cared enough, mostly you, Eric, that you would put yourself in this situation where you were able to save a life, but everyone in between, Chaya and your sister Rabbi and everyone in between that cared enough to make this happen. And I hope that, everyone watching can take something from this and pay it forward, and do something good for somebody else.
Yes, it comes back to the desire to do a mitzvah, to serve the Eibishter, to have some, Avas Yisrael for fellow Jews. It's a huge motivator, at least for me. Or it's an absolutely huge motivator. I don't plan on quitting until they absolutely won't take anything anymore. Right. I have a friend. He's been a good friend for many years, and he has diabetes. His kidneys are not what they used to be. They're talking about a transplant for him. He told me about it. I said, I'll do anything I can for you. Right. So I have no idea if we're the same blood type or anything. They've lowered the barriers for kidney donation somewhat. So maybe someone like me can get involved, one last time. And this would be the last time. This would be it.
And your mitzvah is more expansive than you realize. I am so grateful that you were there for my friend, because God forbid I didn't have Jeff as a friend and a colleague, I would terribly miss him, and his family and his friends and his colleagues.
You might not know how bad your singing is.
Yeah, that's right. Who am I going to have to criticize my singing?
Who else is going to tell you that?
Not me.
And so you don't, every person is a world. You save one life, you save a world. You don't know how many lives you've touched by being there for Jeff. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. If the Jewish community, the Jewish world is missing one, we're just incomplete. We need everybody, right? We can't afford to lose anybody.
That's right. Good. Very nice.
And I'm volunteering my time teaching now, and I know those people. They expressed. I just met with them this morning. I was teaching a class. I do it as a volunteer, and they said, the next time you talk to your donor, thank him for us, because if he hadn't saved your life, you wouldn't be teaching for us, and we love your class. So
see how many.
So really, I'm not quite so comfortable, with people saying that I saved, someone's life. I had a role to play in that. It was really only the Eibishter, can take credit for saving lives. I showed up and, I let them do what they do to me.
You did your part.
I did my part.
You did your part.
And
that's all anyone can do is do their part.
Right.
That's right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And I just want to let folks know next week, we're going to be talking about the healing power of trees in honor of Tu B'Shvat. I want to wish everybody a happy Tu B'Shvat, and I hope everybody gets out, gets to hug a tree, or, I hope you have a plant in your home that you can hug.
Or water.
But either way, thank you so much, and we'll see you all next